morning and welcome to ESPN Los Angeles, 7:10 a.m. For more information, please log on to espnla.com and go to the radio page. If you have any topics you would like to hear on the show, please shoot me an email or check me out on Twitter at LAFERN CUSACK. Today we're talking sex trafficking, human trafficking. Is it prevalent here in Los Angeles? Do we really have to worry about it? Or is it the person next door? Are they being sex trafficked? Here to speak about that, we have Mr. KEM Saunders. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. FAYE MANDELL, she is the licensed clinical social worker. And TERRIKA WOOLFOK, she is a subject matter expert in sex trafficking victims. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, people say that sex trafficking, human trafficking here in Los Angeles is not prevalent. And what do we have to worry about? Faye, can you speak to that?
Well, sex trafficking in Los Angeles is exploding. Human trafficking generates approximately $9.5 billion in the United States. It's very much a part of this society that we live in now.
It's a huge part, and like you said, it's a lot of money. Can you talk about how you got into this and why?
Well, to be quite honest, I was so shocked by the amount of children in foster care who somehow end up being trafficked because of a lack of resources that should have been provided by organizations that I've worked with in the past, from the Department of Mental Health to the Department of Children and Family Services. Unfortunately, those children sometimes are not given the support or safety net they need to transition into adulthood. And when I noticed it most was when I was working at a residential facility for adolescent females. I noticed that a lot of them would AWOL from the facility, and pimps would be waiting on them to seduce them into the life. And they would also coax other adolescent females to recruit these little girls from the residential facility to run away, to become a part of this world of which they found themselves trapped in before they even knew it. And so I felt the need to become more active.
Wow, yeah, they're predators.
Pretty much.
They prey on the young ladies.
There's absolutely no doubt that they're predators.
And they appeal to, them needing love or whatever their needs are, and they know that.
At the core of the therapy that I do, we recognize that there's an extreme need for bonding and developing relationships. Pimps prey on that. They find ways to give them, in many different ways, terms of endearment. Remembering their birthday, taking them out to a restaurant, complimenting them on a regular basis. And they use things that typically would be love messages received by your family members and stuff like that. They use that to exploit them. There's no other way to describe it. They use it to exploit.
And TERRIKA, how did you get involved in this subject matter?
Well, I have been in the field of law enforcement and social services for several years. The last 4 years, I've worked directly with sex trafficking victims. And I think that in the past, we've always been around these girls. They would get these prostitution-related charges, and, we would talk to them about, oh, you're so beautiful, you don't have to do that to yourself. You don't have to prostitute, and we would use those terms, not understanding that they were victims of exploitation. They were not out there by choice. And so just changing, like I said, they've always been there, but just changing our mindset to victim. Because when you say the word prostitute, it states many different things, and it's negative. But when you state the term victim, it changed our whole mindset and how we portray them and how we look at them. So I started receiving training about 5 years ago, and I've been working with the victims ever since in their long-term care and their long-term case management. So that's pretty much how I got started.
And people ask, well, why does this matter? Why should this matter? A lot of men go out and they seek prostitutes, excuse me. They seek that, and they're like, hey, I'm not doing anything, I'm paying for this. What's the problem?
Okay. Well, one of the things I wanted to say was that Los Angeles has been identified as one of the top jurisdictions in the country for sex trafficking, and that the average age of entry into trafficking for a child is 13 to 14 years of age. So that's really scary. And why should we be all concerned? We should be concerned because most of us have children or grandchildren who have computers. And it was one person said, Pamela Sanders Young, who wrote the book Anybody's Daughter, which is an excellent book on this subject. She states that if your child has a computer, that you need to realize that the pimp or the sex trafficker is just knocking on the door of the computer, and all the child has to do is just open it, just click. And that person has gained entry into your child or your grandchild or your niece's room, in effect, into their lives. And one person described this as how to become a pimp. We have a flyer on this. It's psychological, as Kim was saying, and that they use Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. They actually incorporate that into the way that they lure young children, looking at taking care of their basic needs, giving them love, as Kim had said, telling them, oh, this is just temporary, and then giving the child a sense of belonging. Oftentimes these children are runaway or throwaway kids because of the dysfunction in the family. And so the people who are traffickers, they'll go to like bus stations, and they'll go to places where they feel that children who have run away will go. And so that's where they are, and they're there recruiting, as well as the disturbing evidence that they're recruited in foster care. Once they get there, the trafficker has girls in foster care whose purpose is to try to recruit other girls into this life. So we have a child who is damaged, who has extremely low self-esteem, who has an extremely dysfunctional family. And here they're preying on them. It's a travesty. It's criminal, and it needs to be seriously addressed.
And LaFerN, I think we need to alter the narrative in relationship to men who say that they're not breaking any laws because they're paying for it. I, as a male, recognize that men socialize boys. And they socialize boys in a way that make them think that it's okay to engage in inappropriate behavior and the objectification of females. And so for a man to say that suggests that the narrative really needs to be altered by males. We have been socialized as men and as women to accept putting women in an inappropriate space. And that space typically is a space of disrespect. And as a man, I want to challenge that. I want to begin to dismantle some of those conditionings that have been put in place by men. I mean, we teach boys in barbershops that you should see girls in a certain way. We teach boys, in locker rooms that there's a certain way that you need to behave as a man. And most times it's not really dispelling some of the inappropriate ways that men have treated women, from prostitution to manipulating girls to finding ways to tell them whatever you want to get what you want and then just leave, even if you leave them with child. some of that stuff is actually praised in male communities, not just in African American communities, not just in Caucasian American communities, in the male community. You know, and initially I was really concerned about how men have been at the forefront of sex trafficking and human trafficking, but women are also doing some stuff too. There are madams who are being used just as significantly. So on behalf of men, I am here to challenge my gender, to begin to dispel some of those myths, to try to challenge some of those inappropriate socializations, and to begin to become more active, because typically more women are dealing with sex trafficking and men kind of sit on the sidelines. If we contribute to the crisis, we should contribute to the answers.
Yes, absolutely. And the mentality of, you know, oh, I'm a pimp, or, you know, and kids hear that, and it's like, it's a good thing. I'm going to be a pimp, you know, I'm pimp daddy. And that all goes into the psyche of a child of, you know, what is right and what, you know, we can do. One thing remember when there was all these kids that were coming up from the border, and then they were just held in whatever holding area, all these kids.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I heard, I was listening to it on my way home from work on the 405, and I was in fear that some predator is going to go down and get those kids and put them in, you know, make them, you know, go into the life, you know? I mean, how do you say that?
That was a lot of people's fear. They put them in, because they were extremely vulnerable. They were held, and they were just extremely vulnerable.
And see, that's a very interesting part of this. Poverty can be one of the tools that is used to seduce. Because if a person is in poverty and suffering, like if you consider Africa, Bangladesh, Thailand, Mexico, these people don't have much. And so you use that lack of resources that they don't have to seduce them into the life. You know, there is so many people that are doing this because they want to feed their children, they want to eat, you know, and you can put people into prostitution or this life because they really are just looking for an opportunity to live. And that's what makes it so sad, that human beings would exploit that.
Right. And also the promise of the things will get better. You're just doing this on a temporary basis. You know, as soon as I get this, or what, you know, or the settlement, the settlement comes in, or whatever they say to get them to remain. They really have them, and some of them who we talked about, madams, you know, some of them really think that they're business partners of the pimps when they're really not. They're not on the same level as the pimp, but that person will make them believe that they're, you know, this is a joint venture, and you're going to get the same amount of money as I am, or well, I don't know what they tell them. But anyway, they fall for it because of, you know, their self-esteem issues. And
right. Terrika, can you talk about your experience and how you're able to identify a child that is being sex trafficked?
Wow. Over the years, with all the training that I've had and just working directly with them, there are many indicators, but tattoos is huge.
Really?
Traffickers usually brand the girls and boys that they work with. So you'll usually see a tattoo with his name or a name, a brand over the forehead, usually across the chest, on the arm. There are certain tattoos that I look for. A new tattoo. If I know that a girl has been running away from home a lot, that is a clear indicator. Running away from home often, coming home with a new tattoo in those specific places, across the back. But there's just certain places that the traffickers brand their kids.
And this is huge for the gangs in Los Angeles in regards to money making.
Yes.
Can you guys speak to that?
Well, I just stumbled onto this information through speaking to FAYE and some of the other social workers. I had no idea that the narrative has shifted for gang members in that they're, as opposed to dealing with drugs, they're dealing with sex trafficking as a primary economic stream. And that simply, I had no idea. So if you want to expound on that a bit, feel free.
It blew my mind too. But yes, because the gangs are feeling that they'd have to, they'd have to get more drugs to sell. But with a person, that person can be recycled over and over again, and it's not going to cost them. They can make more money for them.
And I did some research on the statistics, and Terrika, feel free to join in. They have sex with up to 20 men per day.
Oh my God.
And some of their pimps or gang members, the quota is you have to make at least $1,000 a day, and if not, they will get beat up. I mean, this is really, really a crisis. But you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to expound on the trend of the gangs. Gangs are finding it. They are finding that, as Faye stated, selling a child, selling a girl over and over again versus selling the drugs is they'll make much more money doing it that way. And on the flip side, it's really hard to go to jail for sex trafficking. You have to, that child has to testify against you in a court of law. So it is very easy to intimidate. I know earlier we said that the average age of entry is 13. That age has actually dropped over the last couple of years to 12. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a lot of, they're young. And why are they young? Because the younger ones sell the most to those predators, to those pedophiles. And so the younger they are, the more money that they can make off of those children. So when you look at it, a 12-year-old is very easy to intimidate. It is rare that you'll have that child get on the stand and testify against that person that has abused them, that has caused so much trauma in their life. And so they're getting away with committing these heinous crimes. And so you'll start seeing more and more gangs, even the girls that are in the gang. They have these quotas, as Kim was stating. So we're seeing the gang involvement in sex trafficking is becoming more prevalent. Just in here in LA County.
And it's said that a pimp can make up between $150,000 to $200,000 per child each year. I'm sure it's more than that now, but that's just an average.
You got to understand that a 12-year-old, their mind is still developing, and I'm speaking from the clinical side of things. And it's just that you're expecting a child to begin to maneuver through their emotions, get to a place where they're able to have the courage to speak against someone who is an adult and is like very, 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 very well versed in manipulation. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have already told these 12 and 13-year-olds what would happen to them, what would happen to their families, what would happen if they ever said anything. And so I think where we as service providers are really missing the mark is we are not fully getting into the mind of what a pimp thinks. And we're not really getting into the mind of what these traffickers think. They are really, really very, 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 very good at understanding how to manipulate systems. That's why the arrest rate is so low. That's why the success rate is so high, because we need to have someone who has been in this life and been very successful at it explain why they have been so successful, because a key part of the mental health profession is assessment. Mm-hmm. And when you assess something accurately, then your interventions can be accurate. And so we're still struggling because we're kind of always on the outside looking in at what that world is, except for people like Terrika who is in the trenches. But I think that's where we start. That's one of the places where we need to step it up, and that is really understand how these pimps and these traffickers are so successful. They're doing something that we're not catching.
Terrika, have you noticed a change in all the years that you've been working in the sex trafficking trafficking victims? Have you noticed a change of thought process or of us getting into knowing what exactly what Kim is talking about of how to break the cycle of sex trafficking?
I think we're getting there. I think that there's definitely been a shift over the last 4 to 5 years with just the way we look at sex trafficking and just noticing the signs. Like I said, these children have always been here. And so the cycle of abuse, the majority of sex trafficking victims have been sexually abused. Those are the pathways to entry. So sexual abuse, poverty, those are key things that we're talking about when we talk about kids that are the most vulnerable to get into the sex trafficking. I think in the past, when we thought about sex trafficking, we think of it as something foreign and not domestic. And so now that we understand that it is here, we're now working on it as a society to handle it in our communities. So I've just seen, and I just wanted to add, regarding trafficking, there are different types of traffickers, and I just wanted to state that.
Yes.
There are parents that traffic their children. There are aunts and uncles. There are kids that have been abandoned by their parents, or parents that have a substance abuse history, and they sell their children. I have seen it all, from selling their child to the dope dealer, and I've seen aunts who are taking care of children that have been taken away from their parents, and they're now with an aunt or an uncle, and they sell that child. I've seen it all. And so those are just ways in which I've seen children, they come out of this abuse at home, so they're usually running from something, not just to something. They're running from something at home. And so when they go into the streets, they're already accustomed to being abused, but now they have this pimp or trafficker that is now showing them love, the love that they did not get in the home. And so that is what initially lures them out to, and that attachment to their trafficker.
And then from a clinical standpoint, then, Kim and I see the victim. We see the child. We see the child as maybe the adolescent now, that's maybe the adult now, who's been abused and trafficked and can't understand why they can't have a healthy relationship, and don't realize that they're walking, post-traumatic stress syndrome diagnosis. Can't understand why they're so depressed. People in the past, the family didn't acknowledge that they were actually raped or sexually abused, because perhaps they were raped and sexually abused, and just get over it. They might tell them. So we deal with that, and it has far-reaching impact. That's why in my clinical work, I really believe, and I do a lot of parenting groups. I just think it's essential. And at the end towards the end of the parenting group, I talk about ways to keep your child safe, and respecting that child, and respecting that child's wants, looking at if there's any fears in that child, examining what's going on. It used to be back in the day, I'm from the South, you just went, you would leave your kid with so-and-so, a relative or whatever. I'm telling people now, don't do that. It doesn't matter if it's a relative.
This is ESPN LA 710. I'm LaFerN CUSACK, speaking with KEM SAUNDERS, FAYE MANDELL, and TERRIKA WOOLFOLK. We're exploring sex trafficking here in Los Angeles and how it's so prevalent, why it's so prevalent. So we have the psychological factors. What are the legislative factors that you guys feel that need to take place or are in place that is against this, that is going to end this?
Well, I think one of the legislative factors, and it may be in the works now, but I'm not really sure. I'm concerned about what's happening down in the Skid Row area. I'm concerned about the cutting of resources in foster care and the cutting of resources as far as residential facilities. There have been so many residential facilities that were closed down in Los Angeles that basically was a home for these children. You had social workers, you had therapists, you had recreational therapists, all on site. These children received education on grounds. These children received meals on grounds. These children received physical and medical attention on the grounds. When you close those down, you put them into foster care systems. some of the foster homes are just not good homes. Some of the most exploitive behavior takes place in foster care by the people who are supposed to be caring for them. That's just a fact. And so if we don't put more energy into doing more thorough vetting of foster parents, then we need to go back to finding ways to put them in facilities where they have professionals that'll be providing care. And these professionals are relegated by particular boards. And if they break the law, they go to jail. And so at least you have a mechanism in place to ensure that these children are at least to some level in a space of safety. And so I think from a legislative position or standpoint, they may need to revisit how we're taking care of children in foster care, because they typically are the ones who are the majority of the population that's being trafficked and exploited. But feel free to add to that if you guys
one
want.
of the things that's refreshing is that Representative Karen Bass of California was introduced a bill to strengthen the child welfare response to trafficking, to sex trafficking. It was passed, and so we do have this bill that would help us to strengthen the things that we're doing on a federal level to combat sex trafficking. So that was refreshing to have that enacted.
I mean, we talked about sex traffickers being, or human trafficking traffickers being prosecuted more, or having it where we throw the key away. How can that happen, Terrika?
How can the
How can we enact some more laws that are an advocate for the victims?
I believe that's going on right now. The laws are changing. There are stiffer penalties for trafficking. The flip side is still that child has to testify against the trafficker. And I think that, and so it's getting that child to cooperate is probably the hardest thing to do sometimes. And by all means, and I don't blame them sometimes, these kids are terrified. Mm-hmm. There's been a period of time where this child has been with this trafficker, has bonded with this trafficker at one time, and then now they have to testify against this trafficker. When we talk about domestic violence victims as adults, they go back to this relationship. So imagine a 12, 13, 14-year-old, the bond that they've now had with this trafficker. So the children are terrified, and so that is the main component. But the laws are changing. There are stiffer penalties. I think that we need to change. The system needs to change. The court systems is what I'm talking about. We need to change the way we treat the girls that are the victims. There's too many times where I've been in the courtroom where the girls are criminalized. They're there with shackles. They were the victims, and now they're coming to testify against the trafficker in chains and handcuffs and orange suits. That has to change. Our treatment of the victims has to change. You'll get more cooperation from them when we treat them better. And when I say we, I mean just us as a society, the juvenile justice system, and child services. And so the child is the way we treat them. Going back to that is key. Because they are a major component. The way law enforcement officers treat them, that's a major component into getting these men convicted.
Fortunately, we have a person who's in sex trafficking in this whole department, on the Hawthorne Police Department division. I heard him speak not too long ago, and he is a licensed marriage family therapist, which is wonderful. And he is over the sex trafficking. So, and he has to educate his people regarding this from a mental health standpoint, because they get confused when they go and they suspect a girl is being sex trafficked because she's in the car, she's young, she's with this older man, she's wearing skimpy looking clothes, and they stop and then they want to arrest him for whatever, they want to talk with him, and she's all defending of him. She's all, oh no, so they get really confused. Well, if she's doing this, then why You know, why isn't she so? So he has to educate them to say, this is how this girl has been conditioned. This is what this trafficker has done to her. This is a psychological manipulation that the traffickers has done to her.
So is there any more education that is being brought for the people, the officers, the people that are doing the arrests? And
Well, I think there's not enough. I think that certainly he is in the city of Hawthorne, because he's a mental health person as well, and so. But I think that has to be replicated, in other cities, in other counties, as well. What we did was with the Association of Black Social Workers that Kim and I are part of, we wanted to highlight this very serious subject, and so we put on a forum on this past spring to bring attention to this, and the title of it was "Our Children Not for Sale: Ending Child Sex Trafficking," and we had people from law enforcement. Lieutenant Dawson, he's from the LAPD, and he's been doing this for like 32 years. And we had another person who was, she had been a victim of sex trafficking. She was able to get out of the life, and now she has a facility. She has a program.
how was she able to get out?
She was in for a long time, and she got really tired of it, and then she had a good person on the outside that really helped her to get out, and so it's very interesting to hear her story. And she became very religious, and so she said that helped her as well.
Right. So how do you break that thought process in someone that has been trafficked and is in this mentality of, the pimp is my savior?
Well, I mean, that's a very important question, and what needs to happen, in my opinion, is therapists need to spend more time in the settings where they're incarcerated and help them to redefine what relationship means, redefine what an appropriate interaction between a person is. And these people, after a while, begin to convince themselves that they're living a pretty good life. And if you can't convince them that it's not, then they won't testify. How can you get a person to testify when they feel like they're okay? They're almost kind of validating it, finding ways to rationalize it, because sometimes their narrative is it's better than the life I had. And so if you can get them to redefine that and understand that, no, you're actually in an unhealthy relationship because of these particular things. That's why therapy has trauma-focused work where you do a lot of psychoeducation work so that they can understand, oh, this is what an appropriate relationship is versus what I defined as an appropriate relationship. And then once they embrace that, then they'll be more motivated to testify because they recognize that they've been victimized. But I think they may need to step up the mental health and psychoeducation to police officers and to the victims.
This is ESPN LA 710. I'm LaFerN CUSACK.
While we want to intervene, I believe that we need to do more prevention because it is preventable. It is just working with these children for the last several years. Once they get in, it is so hard to help them, to steer them back, and so I vote to prevent it from even happening. And so getting into the middle schools, because that age range, they're the most vulnerable, and they are heavily targeted, especially within the inner cities. And malls, and this is not just foster youth. This is anybody's child.
Right.
This is not just, those predators are waiting for your child on the computer.
Not just poor children either.
This is not a foster youth, an inner city thing. We see children being trafficked along here in LA County, along Figueroa or along Western. But now the trend, now since society is now seeing this as something new, those traffickers are now moving those kids. They're more so online now. They're on your back page. They're on Facebook. They are on Craigslist. They're now on social media. And so you may never see a child on the street physically. You know, that child is online. And so preventing children, just things that are one-on-one. You know, you'll see a lot of, any given day, you'll see older men driving by middle schools, lurking, watching that child that's by themselves, watching, like we have 40-hour-a-week jobs. Their 40-hour-a-week job is being a predator, going down the streets, watching in the malls, walking by that middle school, looking for that girl whose head is down, and just having a conversation with them. They're not just snatching these kids off the street. We have what's called guerrilla pimping. They're not doing that per se. They are seducing that child.
Very tactical.
Hey,
Very
you know,
tactical.
you look hungry. You know, how are you today? You look kind of down. Are you sad today? Those are ways that these children are entering into this. So that, so I say prevention again. Just, you know, having more mentors inside the middle schools and talking about it, having an open conversation about it. You don't have to teach the child about trafficking and pimping in depth, but we need to talk about self-esteem. Those are those simple things that I talk about that we take for granted. Mentors that come into the middle schools, and just those programs, those DARE programs and things that they don't have anymore. You know,
because parents don't want that in our school.
Yes,
I'm going to teach my child that. So there's
those simple things.
Yes, middle school is very critical. But another reason that they're not walking the streets because everything's arranged. The trafficker has arranged the hotel room or the motel room, and the person's already there. So all the John has to do is just go in there, go in the room. You know, that's another reason that we may not see them out walking as much.
So, along with having programs in schools that teach emotional intelligence and, you know, a mentorship program and all that, is there programs within the foster care system already implemented to teach the kids about the dangers?
They recently, I believe in maybe August, they're starting to pilot prevention programs within the group homes that these children go to, which I feel is going to be very beneficial in preventing it on the front end. Because a lot of these youth that are in foster care specifically, they've already been exposed. Your greatest recruiter is going to be another girl that is already in the life and already attached to a pimp that goes back to foster care to recruit more girls. So that is your breeding ground. So preventing within the group home, I know.
How can you identify those, you know, those girls or the predators, whatever? I mean, it could be a boy as well, right? So
it can be boys as well, right?
How?
There is no specific way to always identify. It's just that we as helping professionals, we have to be very diligent about constantly assessing.
Exactly.
Constantly observing the interactions between the new and the older girls that come into a relation or come into the facility. Guys too. There is no one answer. The key is to always be observing and looking for people that are not necessarily there to hurt, but they may be doing this because if they don't recruit, they may get hurt.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So there is no one way to find this person that's being manipulated. You have to be, that's why you have to be trained.
Right.
So you look for those signs.
And you have to know just off Jump Street that foster youth, there are certain kids that are just more vulnerable.
Period.
And so, like you said, there's no one way, but they are the most vulnerable. We know that foster youth are, you know, the most vulnerable. So, with knowing that as adults and caring professionals, just having a watchful eye. It's the simple things. It really is. It really is just the simple things. Having a watchful eye of what's going on in the interactions, but just having more programs, just talking about more self-esteem. Mentorship. Those are the things that we take for granted, but that's what needs to happen in order to prevent this, because we know that within 48 hours of a child running away, they will be recruited by a trafficker. They will be recruited, and not just that. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but, you know, we have children, we get Amber Alerts now on our phones. When was the last time you saw an Amber Alert for a missing foster youth?
And one of the other
Foster youth go missing all the time. There is not an Amber Alert. They run away from home. There's no Amber Alert.
That's a good point.
So these are like society's throwaways.
Yeah.
You know, and we are the adults. We're these caring people, but yet we don't treat them as a pseudo parent. We're not acting as a pseudo parent. So you have these children that are running away. There's no Amber Alert. So again, when it comes time to testify, so now move on down the line. How do we get these children to trust us when we have not given them what they've needed along the way?
I think the basis of all this, you know, you have to be watchful. You have to do this. You have to look at how the child is interacting with the child that's already in the system. You know, how are they interacting? Is it a positive communication or not? The bottom line is you have to care. You have to actually care about the kids that you're taking in a facility, a group home, or foster home, where you have to really care. Because through that caring, that's when you're going to be more watchful, more mindful, more concerned, etc. That's just the basis of it.
And also, LaFerN, remember this. You're doing this radio show. You could be doing anything else. Today is Saturday. We could be at picnics. We could be doing anything else. She's doing this radio show. She's doing this radio show. We're doing this because we are what we're looking for. We are the answers that we're looking for. Because if we don't do it, then maybe someone won't hear that number that was just given. It may not be a march on Washington that'll be the key intervention. It may be just us taking time out of our day to say, I'm going to do something to serve the betterment of humanity and bring attention to this in this hour like we're doing it now.
And let's not forget churches. I think we need to challenge the churches. You know, I think it's very important that, you know, they have these resources and a lot of people attending, and, you know, so I think they need to be challenged to, you know, to do what they can to help these children.
Yeah.
So as you all, with TERRIKA, KEM, and FAYE, you guys deal with this on a daily basis. How do you handle this personally for yourselves? How do you not get depressed or discouraged?
You know what? I've never looked at it like this. I mean, this is actually refreshing for me because I'm actually helping. It doesn't depress me at all. Because I'm a tool. I didn't come here to this earth just to like satisfy only KEM. You know, I'm here to try to help. You know, there are people out there that don't have the luxury of the education that I have. So I can speak in certain rooms on their behalf. And so I consider it an honor. You know what I mean? This is not something that I even ever feel depressed about, because I would be more depressed if I saw all of this stuff going on and didn't do anything about it.
For me, I think that, you know, and I feel for social workers as well, but just, you know, having a caseload of kids and hearing the different stories can be depressing. You know, and I think that just taking time out for myself, making sure that I take care of me, keeps me from being stressed out about what's going on. And I think that it just takes passionate folks. You know, when it's your passion, when you really want to help children, you won't get drained. I think what has helped though over the years is not being that. What happens is children, especially foster youth, they don't have that attachment to that one person, and so once they have that person that cares, you will be that. You are that parent for them. So attaching them to a variety of resources will help you. You know, they know that if they can't call TERRIKA, they can call KEM. They can call FAYE. They can call LAFERN. You know, just having a. Because I think sometimes we take for granted that we have family that we can call. You know, there are kids out there that don't have that. And so just having a variety of different resources and people that care, a sort of wraparound team, helps. It helps that individual from being drained, and it helps that child be connected to others in society and know how to navigate different resources within the community.
I agree with both KEM and TERRIKA. And I think the bottom line is for us to be consistent with them, for them to know that when they, you know, call, that we're going to answer the phone, or we're going to get back to them, that we validate them, because they're not validated. Maybe they've never been validated. So I think that concern, caring, being consistent, and validating them are very important.
This is ESPN LA 710. I'm LaFerN CUSACK.
The next step is to keep taking the steps, to keep doing what we're doing, to keep finding ways to enhance what we're doing, and that'll be the next steps. Keep going. Keep going. Keep sharing, keep connecting people to people that care, and that'll enhance the exposure.
I agree wholeheartedly. I believe that we are taking the steps, and this is a huge step, just educating the community and having care, because there are people that care out there. They just don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to help. And so once you get folks on board that already care, we still have human beings that care. And so once you get them on board with what's going on and how to care for these children, they're ready to do it. They are ready. And we've had many donors that have come through that care about these children, that are getting these kids internships, and they're doing different things because they simply care. And so I think that LA County and just United States in general is going, we're moving forward. We're still educating individuals. We're educating children. We're trying to prevent it. So I think on all ends, we can do a better job, yes, but we're moving forward.
Parents should monitor their children's computers and what they're, have put those put those protective devices, on the computers. Go in, find out what the child's doing. A child alone in the room for hours and hours, and it's not good. That person should come out and do things with the family, and
there's like the text messages on the
exactly
phone.
Text messages. Well, that's what happened in the book Anybody's Daughter, which I recommend, by Pamela Samuels Young, because even though the mother took away her computer because she's very concerned about her, but her uncle had given her a phone, so she could access all that on the phone. So that became her downfall. But yes, we have to really have conversations with our children. Don't just make assumptions. Don't just say, how's your day at school? Fine. That's 5 seconds. Who did you sit next to at lunch? How did the math homework go? Ask very open-ended questions so that you have a conversation with the child.
And having not just a conversation, but also just, we can't be afraid to talk to our children about, you don't have to go in detail. I have kids, and so, but, there's things that kids are going to want to do. They're going to want to have an Instagram. Teaching them how to be safe, teaching them that there are predators out there. When you see this online, or someone asks a question, come tell mommy. Just having those conversations with kids, it's very simple. It's the simple things that we don't think to do. But having those conversations, about how to be safe, how to, back in the day, I didn't know about, this has been going on. Trafficking is nothing new.
Right.
My parents told me not to talk to strangers. If you see a car here, having that awareness about your surroundings. I teach my girls how to have awareness about what's going on around them, with their friends, and not just those safety things that, we've kind of steered away from. Just talk about it again, about bus stops and what's going on around them.
So the base of this is having a good relationship with your child. And if it's not good, repair it. Start very basically with just mutual respect. And because kids are resilient, because they're misbehaving, it doesn't mean they have to always misbehave. You have to start back at the relationship and your expectations being, you're expecting your child to be respectful. Right. You're going to be respectful to them. Their misbehaviors aren't sins, and putting things in perspective. Right.
And per capita, I'd say that we as young adults who are like in our careers, we need to kind of step back and recognize it's not always just about us. Oftentimes we forget our grandparents, we forget our parents because we're so into us and doing our life. And the reason I'm saying that is there's so many foster care children that could really use a decent mentor right now.
Yes.
And so if people in other professions would just take a little time to develop a relationship with someone that doesn't have a father or a mother, I think that would be something we should step up, because we really are stuck on ourselves and our own careers right now.
And Faye, again, can you read the hotline number for those who
Certainly.
need help?
It is 888-373-7888.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your expertise. Mr. KEM Saunders, licensed marriage and family therapist. FAYE MANDELL, licensed clinical social worker. And TERRIKA WOOLFOLK, she's an expert in the subject matter on sex trafficking victims. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm LaFerN CUSACK. This is ESPN LA 710. For more information, please log on to our website, espnla.com, and go to the radio page, or shoot me a tweet at LaFerN CUSACK. Thanks again for joining us. See you next week.